Okay, hi. My name is Candace, and this is, I don't remember where to look, the camera, gosh. This is my personal testimony of coming to Jesus. Now, I had this experience many months ago, and I've been thinking for a while about sharing my testimony on YouTube. Now, I know it's not like normal necessarily, maybe it is in this day and age, for anybody who has a sort of born again experience or an experience with the Holy Spirit to then record it and put their testimony on YouTube. But when this happened to me, I was in the middle of attempting to create a YouTube channel, and my whole thing was sort of new age spirituality and all that kind of stuff. So when it intersected me right in the middle of that, I really did have the thought, well, maybe I should continue the YouTube channel. And this happened at this point in time for that reason. But I needed to take a very long break and be very sure, because the whole YouTube thing is a big thing in itself. So it's been, I think, 9 months or maybe a little bit longer since I've posted a video to my channel, which I was only just getting started anyway. So it wasn't like a huge blow to whatever I was creating. But anyway, so just to preface that. Now, also in thinking about my testimony and imagining myself trying to record it, I knew that I would probably be all over the place, because it's pretty tricky, if you haven't tried this before, to talk to yourself, stare at yourself in a camera, and tell a story, and then not maybe get lost and there's nobody sitting across from you to say, wait, what? How did, So for purposes of clarity, and just because I'm sort of a more linear person anyway, I think that I'm going to start from the beginning. And when I say beginning, I mean like the beginning of my life, because honestly, I think that it's all connected, and I think that it all is important to the context of the story that I'm going to tell you, which is my true experience. So in interest of time, not making this a really, really lengthy video, I believe most likely I will break it up into 2 parts. So that's all the preface, so you know what you're getting into before you carry on. And as I said, this is my testimony of coming to Jesus from a background of New Age spirituality, parents from very diverse backgrounds, Scientology, being an actor in Hollywood, being a sound healer and a color practitioner, a yoga teacher, and just about a Kabbalah practicer, just somebody who's very heavily into New Age mysticism, having visited the Ramtha School of Enlightenment, pretty much any direction that was away from religion or Christianity or anything that I foresaw as mainstream is the direction that I went. Definitely a truther, somebody who has delved deeply down the rabbit hole into alternative histories and what you might call conspiracy theories, of which many are true, that kind of thing. So, all right, let me start from the beginning. So I was born to an Indian father and an American mother. Now, my father was born in India in a Muslim province. He was not necessarily raised Muslim. He actually went to a Catholic private school. And my mother says that he was an atheist when she met him. My mother was raised Protestant, but again, really by culture, not by practice. I don't think her family went to church ever, didn't pray, they were not really religious or believers. It was just a cultural thing, you could say. So I was the third child of 4 sisters and was raised with no religion, no introduction to any kind of belief system that was overtly practiced in any way. However, for whatever reason, from some of my earliest memories, I felt a connection to God. I felt there was a God. I, of course, couldn't really fathom what God was, but I felt that there was something more, and I was always attracted to that. I had imaginary friends. I had 2 imaginary friends that were with me for a couple of years, and they were very real to me. I believe that I saw spirits and I didn't really realize that's what I was seeing. When I was very young enough that I still was sleeping in a crib, so I'm guessing around 2 maybe or something, I remember very vividly, at least once or twice, waking up to what just looked like a dark figure standing next to my crib and me being terrified. And I know it wasn't a parent or somebody in our house. I mean, it was like a black figure, and I remember I had this tiny little blanket and I pulled it over my head, and then my feet would hang out and I'd curl up into a fetal position and just be frozen with fear. And that was one of my earliest memories. So I bring that up simply because when you hear my story, many people who haven't had similar experiences might think, well, you were influenced by this or that, and this was your imagination or your creation. But at that age, I mean, I had so little experience, and I certainly hadn't read any books or watched any movies or anything that could have influenced me. So maybe this idea about generational curses or visitations or something, there may be something to that. I don't know. So that's one of my earliest memories. But like I said, I was always interested in the spirit world and my imaginary friends and just sort of off the wall kind of things. And then when I was a little bit older, I became fascinated with paranormal stuff. I share the same birthday as Abraham Lincoln, so I always had a sort of a fascination with him. And you may or may not realize that there are a lot of ghost sightings of Abe Lincoln and a lot of paranormal occurrences associated with him for whatever reason. And I remember I had this Ghost Stories book about Abraham Lincoln. Well, there was many stories of him in it as well as other people. And I have another distinct memory. I was about 7 or 8 years old, and I was getting ready to go to bed the night before school. And I had this strange, almost excited thought that came to me that said, "You're going to see Abraham Lincoln tonight." And I thought, well, that's weird. So I go to bed, and I wake up in the middle of the night, and I turn to my doorway, and there's a very tall, large presence standing in the doorway, and I couldn't make out a face or anything, and it's like a black, dark image, but he was wearing a top hat. And it could have very well been, if you were to describe it, say it was like Abraham Lincoln. And I just remember I couldn't believe what I was seeing, and I became frozen with fear. And just like when I was 2 or whatever, I pulled the blankets over my head, and I just stayed there frozen until I fell back asleep. And in the morning, it was gone. But I never forgot it. It was so strange. And, I shared it. I was never totally uncomfortable, sharing this kind of stuff with my family. I don't really recall if I did at that time, but later I did. And I used to listen to a paranormal radio show called Coast to Coast. And I heard many, many years later that many people have had that experience where they see this tall shadow figure with a top hat specifically, standing at the foot of their bed or something. And that just kind of blew me away, because it was like, because I did tell myself for many years, well, that was probably because of my weird sort of strange fascination with Abraham Lincoln and why I got this weird premonition that I was going to see Abraham Lincoln. And somehow I just thought I concocted that until I heard that many years later and just thought, wow. So there was that. And then I had a very tumultuous family life. We had a lot of ups and downs and upheavals. And it was really, again, an unexplainable connection to God and what I just named spirit that I felt helped me to stay strong and focused. And I did not have religion. Now, I should just, a quick caveat. So my eldest sister is my half-sister. I only mention that because she's quite a bit older than me. And she had a falling out with my parents when I was about 8 years old. And she moved out of the house. And it was a lot of conflict in that relationship. And there was a time when she came back to visit. There was a period of time where she was visiting regularly because she did go away for a while and we didn't see her. And she had become a Christian. And she gave me a Bible, only person who's ever given me a Bible in my life. And she introduced me to this concept of Jesus and a Christian God. And I embraced it for a very short time. Again, I was like 7 or 8 years old and I had no clue. And I remember opening up the Bible and trying to read all the red lettering, because that was Jesus, and reading Revelations and stuff, and just being so confused and not understanding what was happening, and liked the idea of a more specific God, but I couldn't embrace it at all. She did teach me the Lord's Prayer, and I remember that to this day. And anyway, so that was my only introduction to any organized religion or Jesus, and I would say that lasted probably about all of 3 months. And I held on to the Bible for a while. I don't have it now. I don't know where it is. And I remembered the Lord's Prayer, and that's about it. We celebrated Christmas, but to me, like many kids probably in America, it was just a fun holiday where you get presents. I remember somebody saying once, like, oh, this is Jesus's birthday. And I was like, who's Jesus? And now, just a quick aside, I know that Christmas really isn't Jesus's birthday, but just saying how diluted and, lost in the culture, like so many of us have been as children. So again, I'm saying this for context of really how unlikely, or how surprised, at least I am, that this is the truth that I've come upon, because it really was not, if I were choosing this is not the path that I would have chosen. I didn't choose it. And as you'll hear in my story, I chose just about everything else but Jesus. So that was when I was about 8. So yes, tumultuous family life, a lot of stuff going on. We lost our home, moved into my grandpa's house. My parents separated about the time that I was age 12. And it was maybe shortly around this time, maybe give or take a year or two, where I came across this book. Now, my mom had gone to the bookstore, and she's one of these people, when she had money, that if she saw something that she liked, or she might buy several of them and plan to give them away or do something. And this book caught her eye, called To Dance with Angels. And I don't remember the authors. It was like a husband and wife author, but it had a foreword by Shirley MacLaine, so that could tell you something. Very new agey book. But I remember she had one of these books, and it was a paperback, and it was about 400 pages, and it was sitting on her nightstand. And one night I was sleeping in my mom's bed, which I occasionally did, and something awakened me at like 4 a.m. And when I say awakened, it was almost like that excited feeling I got in my stomach when I thought I was told I was going to see Abraham Lincoln. But it was something that just woke me up and brought my attention directly to the book. And it was like I had never noticed the book before, even though I know that I had. And I just felt absolutely compelled to pick it up. And I picked it up and I started to read it, and I didn't put it down until I finished it like 2 days later. So I spent the entire weekend reading this book. And what this book was about is this couple. They're like investigative journalists, and they somehow heard about this man who was channeling this interesting character named Dr. Peoples, and they were just so fascinated by hearing about this that they went to experience it for themselves. And then the book is their experience of all these channeled sessions, basically, with this man. Now, I had never heard about channeling. I mean, I was like 13 or 14 years old. This was a while ago. So I had never heard about channeling. This book absolutely opened my mind up and convinced me that reincarnation was real. Opened me up to just blew my mind open about concepts of the spirit world. I felt like it confirmed a lot of things that I somehow felt, it just made sense to me, and it gave me a lot of hope. And one of the things that it said that I would say that I still agree with is that we're all dealing in separation. As human beings, we are separated from God. And it's all about coming back from separation. But anyway, there were so many other things that I can't remember. I just remember that this book was pivotal in really vaulting my New Age beliefs, and that, this path, this speaks to me, this makes sense. Now, around the same time, so when I was living at my grandfather's house, I had another interesting paranormal experience. So I didn't have them consistently or constantly, but I've had them sprinkled throughout my life. So this was another one. I was a teenager in or around this time. And there was a room upstairs in my grandpa's house, and we called it the rec room because all the time that my grandparents had lived there, it was a big giant room upstairs that the door was, you couldn't even open the door because it was just like an unfinished storage room with junk that my grandparents had put up there. So when we moved into the house, my mom was determined to clear that room out and remodel it and make it like a family TV sort of entertainment room. So we did that, but it always had an eerie feeling. We always felt that there was like it was haunted or something. And one night I had two of my girlfriends, and mind you, we're in high school. We were like 15 or 16. I mean, we were kids, but we were not children. And we had our big screen TV in there and a sofa bed. So the three of us were sleeping in there. And we had just finished watching TV, and we had turned the TV off, and we're sort of talking. And there was these cabinets lining the walls that we were facing as we were lying in the bed. And there appeared these two green, like glowing eyes. Now, they didn't have irises, and they didn't look exactly like an eye. I should just say that they were eye-shaped, but they were fluorescent green and glowing. And we started to get freaked out. And girls can be when they get together, or kids in general. We were, kind of getting ourselves a little overly excited. And I was like, you guys, there has to be an explanation for this. And I was a little scared too, but I was like, there really has to be an explanation for this. This is silly, like two fluorescent glowing eyes on the wall, really. And it occurred to me in my mind that there was a mirror that my sister had that was sitting around somewhere and had some fluorescent stickers on it. So I'm like, maybe it's the mirror reflecting. So I got up my courage and I got up and I went and I found the mirror, and it was not the mirror doing it. And it could find, and then I thought maybe it's light coming in from the blinds, from the street light. And I fiddled with the blinds and it didn't do anything. And finally, honestly, we got so freaked out that we went and we slept somewhere else. And I told my mom about it the next day. And then I didn't really think about it too much. And then maybe a couple weeks later, sleeping in my own bed, and this is the only time that this happened. And again, I have heard of this happening, and it's very disturbing. But I woke up to feeling a pressure on my body. There was nothing there, but you could feel the physical pressure, and it was as if somebody were trying to force themselves upon me, like try to have sex with me. And it was a spiritual entity. It was not a physical being. And it was very frightening. And kind of in that same night, I believe it was like a dream, but it was almost like I was envisioning, I was back in that rec room, but it was like I was floating, and I could see my mom having a conversation with her friend in that room. And somehow it was all connected, but it was, I can't really do it more justice than that. It was like a premonition, or it was like a vision, and I was being attacked. It was very scary. Well, turns out that in talking to my mom, after I told her what my friends and I experienced, just because, just in case, she said she was in there with her girlfriend, and she basically, I don't know if she called it a prayer, but she told whatever was in there to get out and leave her children alone. And I didn't know that, but somehow I was being shown it in my dream. And I felt like whatever it was that was in there was the same thing that was attacking me as I was also being made aware. It's very convoluted. But that was a powerful paranormal experience. Nothing that I have never experienced like that before or since. Not that exact thing. And it was frightening. But again, it's like these things happen, and I would even, kind of share it with my mom, and then life goes on. It's not like earth shattering. And you have a funny way, I tend, and I think humans have a funny way of just eventually just brushing off things that you can't quite explain, because what is your other option, But it, in some sense, definitely affirmed. I mean, I didn't really question that there's a spiritual world and there's a paranormal world, and that there are many things beyond our regular capacity of understanding, or at least the scope that, quote unquote, normal people will allow themselves to think about or acknowledge. So that wasn't so far-fetched for me. I mean, I knew that there was reality to a greater world that we just don't see or acknowledge all the time. So there was that. Then after high school, I went to New York to go to an acting school. And in New York, the first place that I lived was a really old hotel called the St. George Hotel. So if you're from Brooklyn Heights, New York, then you probably know this hotel. Apparently it was famous like in the 20s and 30s. It was at that time a very fancy hotel. A lot of famous people stayed there. But at this time, and this was the late 90s, it had become a student housing for students, and also like housing for natural disaster victims. So a lot of people who had lost their homes in storms or floods, whatever, lived in here. And it was like a 60, I think, if I remember correctly, like a 60-story building. I mean, it wasn't small, and it was kind of eerie. Like sometimes you'd walk down the hall and it felt a little bit like The Shining or something. So I guess my point is that there was definitely it was definitely haunted. There was definitely a spiritual component. It was definitely a spiritual component. So this was sort of the next very memorable thing that happened to me, sort of paranormal. And that was, I was sleeping there one night, and I shared the room. So I lived there for 6 months, and I shared the room with a 30-year-old virgin. She always talked about being a virgin, from the British Virgin Isles, and she was Catholic. And it was very interesting living with her. I loved her. Her name was Bernadine, but I don't think many people could have handled it. Like if I went out at night with my friends, she would put the chain lock on the door, so I would have to knock and wake her up to get back into my own room, that kind of thing. But anyway, that's sort of I digress. So I'm sleeping one night, and I'm awakened by my name being called, like this ethereal, like Candace, 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 and it sounded like maybe hundreds, or at least several, 20, 30, like many people, voices calling my name, like Candace, Candace, Candace. It was the strangest, most honestly frightening thing that happened. I woke up and was just hearing my name being called, and it lasted for several minutes, and I was definitely awake and going like, what is happening? And I thought, oh, I'm losing my mind, or like, this is what happens when people become schizophrenic. I was very scared, and I did not tell anybody about that for a long time. And again, it fortunately never occurred again, and so I just blew it off. But I tell you about the hotel and that this place is haunted because in retrospect, I'm like, yeah, I think there was just spirits floating all around that place. And for whatever reason, I feel like I'm one of those people that's a little more open to the spirit world, and they're attracted to me. They're trying to get my attention or something. And my roommate had some definitely supernatural paranormal experiences in that room too. So now I'm just telling you these things because it gives context to, just like I said, it's kind of a timeline of how I've come to the place that I've come, and also to say, at least from my perspective, my experience, there's no doubt that there is a spirit world, and that there are good spirits and bad spirits, and that, anyway, I'm getting off track again. But so I hope this is helping to give context to the greater story of my path and what I will come to. So I didn't really have too many other crazy experiences in that hotel. And I wasn't in New York very long, a couple years, and then I came back to Los Angeles. So I was born and raised in Long Beach, California, which is just about not even an hour south of Los Angeles, beach town. And from a very young age, I loved to dance, I loved to perform, and I opted to skip college, and because I felt very strongly that I knew I wanted to be an actor, and I just didn't want to waste any more time in school when I knew what it was that I wanted to do. So I went to New York. Actually, when I was 15, I started this acting class in LA. And then I took off to go to New York, which was like my college. And then I came right back to this acting class. So now I have to give you a little bit of an introduction to what this acting class was, because this is a large part of my story. So in Hollywood, in Beverly Hills, there was a pretty well-known school called the Beverly Hills Playhouse. And it was run by a fairly prominent Scientologist named Milton Kitselis. And at the time, I knew nothing about Scientology, other than I remember being a very little kid and seeing the commercials for the L. Ron Hubbard Dianetics books. And I remember my parents saying, like, oh, that's brainwashing. That's about it. And I don't even know if I really made the connection. It didn't really mean anything to me. But I was 15 years old and I was really hungry. I was like so determined. I was such an ambitious, like determined person about my goals. Like I didn't want to waste any time. And one of my good friend's older sisters was going to the Playhouse already. And so when I asked her about it, she was like, oh yeah, this is a very, phenomenal school, blah, blah, blah. So I went to this school and said I wanted, that I wanted to go there. Well, you had to be, legally, you had to be 18 years old to attend the Playhouse, which I was not. I was 15. But they said, oh, one of our very good teachers teaches a teen class that you attend on Saturdays. So long story short, I joined that class. And it was a class of maybe like 12, 15 kids, ranging in ages from like, I think maybe the youngest person was, well, sometimes somebody's like little sister would come, but like 12 to 18 or 20. I don't remember now. I mean, I aged with all these people, so I can't remember exactly how old, but it was a teen class or early 20s. It was a young person's class. And it was right there in Hollywood. And I was really excited. And it was run by this very egomaniacal, domineering, but very sort of seductive woman named Gloria. And so I joined the class, very timid, very shy, had no background in acting. I just knew from being a dancer and a performer that this was the direction that I wanted to go. And there was a couple of sort of famous kids in that class, which was, very exciting and inspiring, and felt like, yes, I am in the place I need to be. But now, at the same time, I mean, my parents had officially divorced. Our family was totally broken. My mother, was dealing with, addictions to alcohol, and my father had lost his hearing when I was 8 years old, had become deaf, and he had, when my parents divorced, he went off to Canada and sort of abandoned us for like a year. And I mean, things were my oldest sister was running away and, had a baby at a very young age. And my family life, my personal life was completely in shambles. So I just say that because when I found this class, it didn't take very long for me to just feel like I had hope, especially in this very strong personality, female character in my life. She was, in many ways, I was looking for a parental figure, somebody to guide me, somebody to lead me, somebody that I had faith in, to show me the way, to give me something to believe in. And of course, my parents knew nothing about acting or that world, so I didn't really give a lot of confidence to what they had to say. And because of everything that I had seen that had happened, I frankly, I loved my parents, but I didn't have a lot of respect for their life choices or what they had to express to me. So I was looking for somebody and something to believe in, which made me the prime candidate for a person of this woman's character, unfortunately. But again, I was very, very naive and completely trusting and willing. I had never met somebody like this, so I could not imagine that she was what she was. It took me 10 years to see it and admit it. So I joined this class 15. I went once a week, and it became like everything. I went away to go to New York, and I think very much to prove myself, or felt I had to prove myself, like get a degree, just somehow getting some kind of degree, because school was important to me. And in retrospect, I am sad that I didn't go to college, and it wasn't because I didn't have the opportunity or the grades, because I did. I felt in a hurry. I felt like I didn't have time to waste for whatever reason. Now I look back and go, I wish I had wasted some more time. Not wasted. I wish I had not been so determined and had given myself the space to breathe and experience other things and give myself another experience. But anyway, so where am I? So I'm in this class. I come back after New York, and I'm 19. And the class has grown. My teacher has since had a falling out with her teacher, who was this Milton Katselas guy who ran the Beverly Hills Playhouse. And she had a falling out with him. And now she, for all the years that she was a student of his, was never a practicing Scientologist, never got into it. And now, for some reason, at her point of ending that relationship with him, decided to become a Scientologist. Oh, and I need to back up. So the point of this class, that even though when I joined Gloria's class, she was not a Scientologist and I wasn't a Scientologist, and you didn't have to be a Scientologist to be in the class, the fundamental teachings of this particular acting style was rooted in Scientology, in even almost Scientology speak, in Scientology fundamentals, in their just the basics. And again, something I really didn't understand, and it didn't matter, it didn't bother me. So now I've come, and the class has grown. It wasn't just teens and early 20s. Many people from the Playhouse who were Gloria's students decided to come, and the class was growing. And this happened over a period of years. And in that time, many, Gloria, and then as was her way, whatever she was getting involved in, she was bringing her students in. It was like her students were her children. And she only had one son and was not married, and I think she really liked that. She wanted everybody to be working for her or around her. It was like the class was her built-in family. So she got into Scientology, and as a result, many of her students did, and I was one of them. And what initially attracted me was a health aspect. I had, unfortunately, dabbled in drug use and different things. And if you are not at all familiar with anything about Scientology, the whole thing is about going up this bridge to becoming clear. And the very first big step in the bridge is something they call the Purification Rundown. And this is to detox your body, because according to L. Ron Hubbard, residue from any drugs, any toxins that you've taken into your body gets stored in your fat cells. So he designed this program where you take niacin, which is just a B vitamin, but it provides a flush and kind of gets your blood glowing. You'd run on a treadmill or run around outside for like a half an hour to get your blood flowing, get real red, and then you go sweat in a sauna like all day. And then you heavy dose on vitamins and drink a ton of water. And people would do this purification rundown. I think I did it for, I can't remember if I did it for 30 or 60 days, but people would do it, for months sometimes. It was up to you, the individual, to decide when you were done. So I was very attracted to the idea of doing this. I thought it sounded great. Whether I was going to become a Scientologist or not, I didn't care. I thought, that sounds great. I want to detox from all this stuff. So I went to the Celebrity Center, which is what it's called, their main center in Hollywood, where many celebrities do go. And it's supposed to be sort of a haven for artists. And I went, they have a little movie theater there, and they show you an introductory video. And I went with one of my girlfriends who had come to the acting class. She wasn't in the class with me for very long, but at this time she was there, and she and I went together and we watched this video together. It was just the two of us in this darkened movie theater. And I don't remember all the specifics of the video, but it was very unforgettable that at the end of the video, they show a man on a bridge, and there's the voiceover of the narrator, and he says, "You could decide not to do Scientology, or you could decide not to become a Scientologist. You could also choose to take a gun and blow your brains out. It's up to you," or something really shockingly weird. And I remember we walked out of there, and then our teacher Gloria was there to meet us. We were to go to the cafe or whatever and talk to her afterwards. And I remember she's like, I know, the video is weird, just ignore that part. So that was my introduction to Scientology. And again, I ignored that part and just, in my kind of typical bulldozer way, just decided that I was going to do what I wanted to do. And if I was going to be part of this class, Scientology was going to be a part of it. And okay, let's do it. And against my parents didn't ever stop me from doing anything. But certainly, when I told them, I'm going to go to the Scientology Center, was like, oh, brainwashing, why do you, but again, they never stopped me or forbid me or said you can't do it. And I was an adult by this time anyway. So this is how I got involved in Scientology. And slowly but surely, the acting class became, now it wasn't just one day a week, the class, by the way. It was there were three 3 classes a week, plus extracurricular things. Like when we would put on showcases, there was always, everybody had to volunteer and do their part, even if they weren't in the showcase. So there was always something to be done. Even if Gloria was like moving or doing something, we would be asked to help her with that. So it was really crazy. It started to consume my life. I worked and I went to acting class. I didn't have much of a social circle outside of the people in that class. I didn't have much of a life. I even blew an opportunity to go to India with my dad because I thought it was more important that I go to acting class and not miss it. And now I just look back and I go, gosh, I really was brainwashed. But anyway, so I started with the Scientology, and now I could not afford this Purification Rundown right off the start. So they have all these little small, low-level introductory courses that you can take for $30, $50, and it's just indoctrination into their thought, into the Scientology world. Now, again, if you don't have any experience with Scientology, they use all these words, they have a lot of their own words, and then they use a lot of abbreviations, so it's almost like they have their own language. And L. Ron Hubbard was really into using the dictionary to understand meanings of words. Not that that's bad, but I mean, they just had a very specific way. And from the get-go, even though there was part of me that really loved the self-help aspect, I really liked this idea that I could gain a greater control of myself and my MEST, as they would call it, matter, energy, space, and time. So sort of your own reality. So really what Scientology is just another form of New Age. We create our own reality, but L. Ron Hubbard created his own religion. And that's a whole other thing. I'm sure a lot of people have heard. I don't know if it's a myth or not. There's probably some truth to it that L. Ron Hubbard and Jack something. Anyway, these esoteric guys were sitting around and, L. Ron Hubbard said, the best way to make money is to start your own religion. And then that's what he did. And then just a quick aside, if it's not clear already, I don't support Scientology. And I'd say the biggest reason is because L. Ron Hubbard was a horrible person. And I just don't believe that something good could come from somebody who was so sick. He was so sick. Now, that being said, it doesn't mean that there are some concepts in Scientology, because everything was pretty much borrowed. It was borrowed or made up because L. Ron Hubbard was a science fiction writer to begin with. But doesn't mean that there's some concepts that in some way have some, at least validity, but the way that Scientology is used, ultimately, I say, it's garbage. But so I'm taking these small, low-level courses and just slowly becoming more indoctrinated, basically. And so that became part of my curriculum. Is that now it's the acting class, and now it was going to the Celebrity Center, and you'd spend like 3 to 6 hour blocks there, doing these courses. And for anybody who's interested, because I know a lot of people probably find this fascinating, so when you finish a course, they then route you to somebody they call an auditor. And an auditor is somebody who sits behind a desk, one of the things they do, and they have this machine called an e-meter machine. And all it really does is register electrical impulses. And so the person they're auditing will sit on the other side of the table, and they'll hold these little metal cans, and they're like little metal hollow cylinders, and you hold them in your hands. And after you finish a course, they have a series of prescribed questions that they ask you because they want to know if you really have completed the course or if you're hung up on something, not like telling the truth. So a lot of people call this like a lie detector test, but it doesn't work exactly like a lie detector test. And I quickly became privy to a way, because it's kind of scary. Like, you don't want them to tell you like, oh no, you didn't understand the course. And like I said, it's just picking up, out of the ordinary electrical impulses. So they're not reading your mind. It's not, they're not able to do that. It's just, anyway, it's just kind of nonsense. So I very quickly found a method that worked for me where I just fixated my eyes like on the clock or something and made sure that my breath was like very even and shallow. And I like I just wouldn't think about anything. I'd just stare at the clock while they asked me the questions, and I would just answer with this little emotion or anything at all, and I would always pass. And it's funny because I think about this now. One of the things I noticed about so many of the people that were there is I used to say to other people when I describe it that it was like Village of the Damned. It was like people didn't, like they had no, there was no soul behind their eyes. Like they had no life. And it's very sad. But anyway, I think I'm digressing again. You're probably going, well, why did you even stay there? Because, and I don't think I can really do it justice in this video because I also just don't think it's really important, but the power and the control that this acting teacher ended up gaining over me was so hypnotic and became so, her tentacles were in every aspect of my life that I was just so controlled that I couldn't imagine not doing it, because if really she was telling me to do it, I was going to do it. And it was for my salvation, basically, for me to be delivered from, my horrible family life and all my personal imperfections and all my shortcomings. This was the way to overcome them so that I could be a successful actor and be successful in life. I mean, that was what I was being sold. And I had invested everything in this dream and this idea. So I was going to do whatever it took. So finally, I did come up with the money to do this big purification course, and it was very interesting. I sit in a sauna all day and you play checkers or cards. I mean, I played backgammon with Laura Prepon. If you don't know who she is, she's that redhead from that 70s show, and now she's on, whatever shows. But it was like that. It was just normal. It was like, this is what people in Hollywood were doing. And you really were, taught that it was also really for the benefit of mankind. Anyway, it's so deep. I just don't want to get stuck in that. So here I was getting totally sucked into Scientology, and what I later would understand was really some really like dark occult stuff. Totally trapped in this acting class, and the only thing that I felt that I had to live for was my dream, and felt that that through my success, from me sort of rising from the ashes of what was my family, I was going to rescue and save all of them. I was going to help my dad, because he was the only one that really had any money anymore, and I was going to help my mom so she wouldn't have to be dependent on my dad and wouldn't have to struggle, and I was going to be able to bring my sisters back to our family. I mean, this was really what I thought. Like, I had this savior complex. And again, I didn't see it that way at the time. It was just, that was my role. I was the one that wasn't going to screw up. I was going to make everything right. And so this was a big driving force, again, of why I was so determined and dogged and didn't want to fail. I didn't want to quit. And for me, quitting meant, if I left that acting class, if I blew off Scientology, then I was a quitter. What did I have then? Because I had no religion. I had a vague, my legs. I had a vague belief in God, but I didn't really have anything. And I was in my early 20s now, so I already didn't really know anything. Somebody that thought I knew stuff, but at the same time, I didn't know anything. I had such little life experience. So I feel like this video is getting long-winded here, and I'm losing my train of focus. So I think this is a good place to end part 1. And in part 2, I will pick up here, and hopefully be able to take you to the point where I am now. And if you made it this far, thank you for watching, and please join me for part 2.